So my name is Annie McShiras. I am our investment and fundraising director. I've been with EB PREC for 5 years now. We've been through a lot since 2020. We've really grown and built our membership and grown in our impact, which I'll share with you today during the presentation. I'm also joined by my colleagues, Chris Wakefield. Wave hello, Chris, so everyone can see who you are. Chris is our community engagement manager and education facilitator, and then Christina Kenny, who is our Esther's cultural manager, Esther's Orbit Room cultural manager. So Chris and Christina have joined our team recently in the past year, and we're so glad to have them on our team. To help us better understand community we're serving. Again, please sign in for today's meeting via the form linked in the chat. And throughout this presentation, we'll be sharing a lot of resources and information. And we'll email you a document with all the links with that information afterwards. So don't worry about keeping track of every little detail. Great. So before we get started, we want to acknowledge the land that we're on. We are on Ohlone territory, and just recognize the work that we're doing takes place on unceded, occupied Ohlone territory. Indigenous folks are still here, continue to experience the violence of ongoing displacement at the hands of capitalism and colonialism. And we want to acknowledge the presence of our Indigenous residents and community members, as well as ensure that our work is co-led by Indigenous voices. So we do this at EB PREC by guaranteeing that one of our board seats is held by a member of the Segorite Land Trust, which is an Indigenous women-led land trust in Oakland. And learn more about Segorite Land Trust with the link on the slide deck. And we also encourage folks who are able to pay Shumi land tax to this land trust in support of Segorite Land Trust land stewardship and rematriation efforts. We've been really honored to work in partnership with Segorite Land Trust over the years as to land stewardship and land sovereignty organizations working to take land and housing off of the speculative market. So thank you for taking a moment to reflect on this legacy and our connection to it and our personal commitment to undoing the harms that have been done. So next slide. I just want to start with our mission. And so let's begin with just like understanding who we are as EB PREC. So EB PREC facilitates BIPOC and allied communities to cooperatively organize, finance, purchase, occupy, and steward land and property, taking them off of the speculative market and creating community-controlled assets. We empower communities to cooperatively lead a just transition from an extractive capitalist system into one where communities are ecologically, emotionally, spiritually, culturally, and economically regenerative and restorative. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but essentially what we do is we're working to undo the harms caused by an extractive real estate and financial system. And we're working to create solutions around a more regenerative system that allows us to have agency and control over our lives and the land that we live on. And we do this with our unique model that I'll be sharing more with you about in the coming hour. So as a real estate cooperative, we understand that our communities are facing many housing injustices, past and present. And we are going to really focus on our model and our approach to reshaping the real estate market in this presentation. And want to just acknowledge that we are not an emergency housing organization. However, we do want to offer some resources to you in case you or anyone you know is experiencing immediate housing insecurity. We encourage you to contact Alameda County's 211 service if you or someone you know is in need of immediate housing assistance or health or human services programs. So today's agenda will cover the following 4 topics. We'll discuss the current state of the housing market and how it's impacting our community. We'll talk about how EB PREC's model is working to reverse this trend, which is the solution that we're offering. We'll talk about EB PREC as a cooperative and what that means, what our cooperative model means and how it operates. Lastly, we'll talk to you about how you can get involved in this movement as a part of EB PREC. We'll have opportunities in the Q&A for questions at the end of the presentation. But as well, feel free to drop questions or raise your hand and take yourself off mute if you have questions as we go, and we'll try to answer them along the way as well. So in the world that we exist in today, see, this is the problem, right? In the world that we exist in today, we're seeing that our community is getting displaced and hollowed out due to rising housing costs. And this has been ongoing for the past few decades. It's getting worse and worse every year. So let's look at how the current system of real estate works, starting with the landlord. So we've got our evil landlord there, um, unnamed white man, unnamed older white man. So the landlord who purchases property with support from the bank or gets a mortgage rents it out to tenants, right? And so the contributions and benefits and equity of managing that and owning that land and property goes directly back to the landlord. Even when debt is paid off on the property from the mortgage, the landlord is still profiting from the property with the rent that he collects. We, the people, aka the renters, are stuck with the short end of the stick as we continue to pay the landlord, and he's able to make more and more profit over time. So you notice that the arrows lead to the landlord and the bank's profiting and building equity off of the tenants. So wealth is only flowing in one direction. This is what we call extractive real estate. It's extracting money and wealth from community members, from we the people or the tenants, and consolidating them into the hands of just a few financial institutions and landlords. Extractive real estate practices continue to displace communities in Oakland and all over the country. But this doesn't just hurt low-income communities alone. It increasingly is impacting all of us. According to the American Community Survey in 2023, over 21 million renter households spent more than 30% of their income on housing costs. That's nearly half of the 42.5 million renters across the US. Data from Rent Cafe shows that Oakland's cost of living is 40% higher than the national average, while there are less than 30 affordable housing units per 100 low-income Californian families. So we have a huge housing shortage, and specifically a huge shortage of low-income housing options for people. A 2022 point-in-time count showed that there are over 5,000 unhoused residents in Oakland, where 57% of the population is renting. And the average cost of a one-bedroom unit is over $2,000. And so we're seeing that there's a direct correlation between the high cost of housing and our houselessness population, folks that are living on the streets because they can't afford rent. As we begin to feel the consequences of these barriers to housing, we also see that there are disproportionate impacts along racial lines that impact vulnerable, underserved communities at an incredibly high rate. And so who is impacted the most by this issue? Black Californians make up more than a quarter of the state's homeless population, despite being 7% of the state's population. And 2021 data from the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act reveals that Latino applicants face a mortgage denial rate of 14% compared to 8% with white applicants. Between 2000 and 2015, low-income Asian households decreased in several neighborhoods around the Bay Area that traditionally have been home to large immigrant communities. And half of all low-income Native American households in Oakland are at risk of being impacted by gentrification and displacement. It goes even deeper. In 2023, there were 60,000 unhoused women in California, which is 50% higher than the previous 8 years, with domestic violence being the top driver of displacement. Additionally, formerly incarcerated people are 27 times more likely to be unstably housed than the general public, and 10 times more likely to become homeless. LGBTQ youth are overrepresented in the unhoused, transitional aged youth population at 40%, despite being 5 to 10% of the overall youth population. And a recent statewide study in California found that 48% of single homeless adults are aged 50 or older, with reduced or lost income being the top reason that made their housing unaffordable. So we are seeing that ownership matters, and the high cost of housing is making it more and more difficult for renters to stay in place, especially renters of color or renters that have historically been underserved, and they're the most vulnerable to the housing crisis. That's where EB PREC comes in to do this grassroots work in a way that actually addresses these problems in this crisis. So our story, when our founders asked themselves, what is another way to live in the world that's not this, that's not that doesn't reflect these statistics that I just shared with you. They realized they had no choice but to imagine something more transformative. So one day, the People of Color Sustainable Housing Network, also known as POTION, executed a plan to provide a financial and collective framework for Black and Brown folks to mitigate displacement, a permanent solution that would have an impact on the problems that we addressed before, on the housing crisis that we're a part of. In 2017, POTION partnered with the Sustainable Economies Law Center, which is a creative legal support organization, and through a series of meetings, many meetings over the course of a year, created an entity that could purchase property and create sustainable housing on its own terms. That's how EB PREC was born. So as is at EB PREC, we do things a little differently to reimagine real estate. We are trailblazing a unique alternative to the extractive real estate market by proposing a model of community-controlled land and housing. Rather than extracting wealth from our community and funneling back up to the large Wall Street banks and other speculative investors, we purchase and manage our own properties as a cooperative using investment funds from our members and channeling the equity and dividends that we receive back into our community. Notice how the arrows in this chart are leading back to the people, the cooperative, and the residents who are living in the properties that we own, creating a circular regenerative flow of wealth as opposed to the one-sided extractive flow of wealth that we saw in the previous chart. As we put our model into practice, we've been able to provide a permanent, affordable housing to our community and collectively build wealth and equity together. Free from the unpredictability of possible displacement, our tenants have pursued career paths like running the Alchemy Coffee Collective, a Black worker-owned cafe, directing the Alipado Project, which is the first nonprofit in California to sue violent domestic abusers, and founding Prince Street Studios, an affordable creative studio space. And we've seen that opportunities are endless when we release our more vulnerable BIPOC community members from the burden of high rent. So we work to enact this just transition to a community-controlled housing system through our mission pillars, and we have 3 mission pillars. So actually, I'd love to ask Mario or Anushka if you could read aloud one of the first pillars, and we can read them together. Mario, go ahead.
Land without landlords. EB PREC creates pathways for everyday people to organize, finance, acquire, and co-steward land and housing on our own terms because housing is a right, not a commodity. Keep going.
Thank you. Anushka, would you be willing to read the next one?
Sure. Restorative economics. EB PREC is transforming an unjust finance and housing system to build collective wealth among historically disenfranchised Black, Indigenous, and POC communities to redistribute the resources.
Great. And I can read the last one, which is Heal People Power. EB PREC cultivates democratic and nonviolent governance to short circuit, learn colonial power practices, rebuild our capacity to heal one another, and use Indigenous practices to reimagine collective power. And we'll get into what all of these mean a little later on, but I wanted to share with you, these are kind of our guideposts, if you will, our mission pillars, and they allow us to guide ourselves in the everyday work that gets very detail oriented, but really these are the main reasons why we exist and why we do the work that we do. So we're going to play a short video that is a celebratory party for our first property acquisition back in 2019.
Motivated by EB PREC and just inspired for a long time, and I think it's incredible the type of movement that they're building and the fact that you can be involved as a community member or as an investor. $1,000 to be able to park that into this amazing community project that's going to help people live in secured, permanent housing, like you can't. I couldn't think of a better place to invest my money.
I contacted the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative and I said, hey, I don't really understand what you guys do, but maybe you'd be interested in helping us out to figure out how we could buy the building. And they literally figured out how we could buy the building. They got the loans together. We met up with our landlords. We drove all the way to Gilroy, where our landlord is, and met with him and tried to convince him to sell the building to us. And then he did. And so now we get to live here forever.
Living in a space where your housing isn't secured just makes everything so much more difficult, and just it's so much more empowering to be able to cooperatively own a property.
What I'm most excited about is the dismantling of this current structure, this current capitalist structure, and creating opportunities for our people to return to our native state, so to speak, where we are clear about the fact that we're able to do for self. We don't need to ask for anything. We don't need to rely on anyone else for anything. We're here, we've been doing it, we can continue doing it, and we can do it in a cooperative way that supports our values and our missions. We don't need permission for that. EB PREC is moving in that way, and I support that.
Awesome. So yeah, that was the closing escrow party for Co-op 789. Co-op 789 was EB PREC's first property. We secured this property in 2019 in partnership with the Northern California Land Trust, or NCLT. This multi-unit Oakland-based property houses residents of color from all backgrounds. Here are the residents in this picture. And our community owners and investor owners helped us raise $100,000 to make this acquisition happen. One big part of that was we actually partnered with the Sustainable Economies Law Center to change a California state law called AB 816, which allowed us to offer 5-year shares to help us purchase housing and create housing cooperatives and community land trust projects. And so we're really grateful for our member body who assembled under our vision to help us get this done. And this was, again, our first acquisition, which led to the trajectory that we started on back in 2019. We have a number of other residential properties under our belt, and they're now serving a total of about 70 tenants, about including families, so including children in our properties. California Avenue is a single-family residence that one of our previous staff members in her multi-generational household secured with EB PREC through creating an owner group, and we'll get more into owner groups later in the presentation. Prince Street property was one of our first donated properties. This Berkeley, California property, which is now valued at $1 million, was gifted to us from its 50-year resident and owner, Carolyn, an elder who had originally purchased it for just $30,000 50 years prior. Carolyn saw this gift as an opportunity to contribute to the Just Transition movement and support Oakland's artist community. Prince Street now permanently houses 3 African-American femme working artists and arts educators. And then Pippin Street is a 10-unit property in DB Oakland that we acquired in late 2023. Currently, 2 of its units are occupied by EB PREC members. A board member and a community owner are residents of Pippin Street property, in addition to other residents. We're not just working to liberate affordable residential properties. You may have heard about our flagship project in West Oakland's historic 7th Street corridor, Esther's Orbit Room. In 2021, we acquired this multi-use property for residential and commercial use. And this right here, as you can see, is a design for the future development of this property. There's been so much work that we've been doing to try to bring this property into cultural reactivation and to support the community and to become again a center of arts and culture in historic West Oakland. So far, we've hosted a number of happy hours with an open bar, local food vendors, and live musicians. We brought jazz back to the corridor for the first time in many decades. We actually plan to break ground to do a revitalization effort and reconstruction effort to bring the property back to a usable state. We're going to finally be breaking ground this coming January 2026 to transform the space as a full bar, performance venue, community kitchen, movement studio, and much more. And we are looking to bring in anchor operators and chefs and food operators into the space. So if you're interested in learning more about that process, we've got a call for RFPs um, to um, to learn more about the opportunity to be a part of our Esther's Orbit Room project by joining us as a food operator. Our second commercial acquisition was the barn on the left here, which was acquired in late 2023. This 2,300 square foot building is located right next to Esther's Orbit Room and is part of our larger mission to revive and activate the 7th Street corridor in West Oakland. We envision using the barn as a community cafe, meeting, organizing, and makerspace, and potentially as well museum space to showcase all of the historic happenings on the 7th Street corridor and now what we were doing to date in the present time. In September of 2024, we acquired our third commercial acquisition, the radical community organizing space Omni Commons on Shattuck Avenue, North Oakland. Omni was developed in the wake of the Occupy movement through 2011 through 2014 and faced foreclosure due to financial difficulties exacerbated by the pandemic. To keep our organizing ecosystems alive, we purchased the property and are now on the path to activate this space, to reactivate the space as a place where artists, activists, and culture bearers can build upon and preserve Oakland's history. And as mentioned earlier, EB PREC has been heavily involved in the revitalization of the 7th Street corridor in West Oakland. Esther's Orbit Room and the barn are just one step towards a larger and longer term vision to acquire properties on the 7th Street corridor and interrupt gentrification. 7th Street was once a bustling, historic Black, blues, and jazz district that was destroyed by eminent domain, the Cypress Freeway, BART, and the post office. It was neglected for decades by the city of Oakland, who zoned it as industrial, despite the thousands of residents living in the neighborhood. So EB PREC, in partnership with Bay Area LISC and a number of other partners, is reactivating this corridor in collaboration with the city of Oakland, small business owners, and local residents to create a safe, dignified, and community-owned commercial district where we can all enjoy for generations to come. And we've got another video coming up to share with you more.
Okay, so I'm gonna do it. Ready? EB PREC, cuando? Hello, I am Noni Session. I'm a third-generation West Oaklander and one of the founding staff members and executive director of the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. Today, we are at Liberation Park for the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative third annual member meeting. This year, it's an open member meeting and a land liberation celebration, celebrating our historic acquisition of the Esther's Orbit Room along the 7th Street corridor in West Oakland. The East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, as a Black and people of color-led, multi-stakeholder co-op, knows that there is no shortage of vision in our community. What there is a shortage of is resources, and in fact, non-extractive resources. So we galvanize low interest and non-extractive investment. We help build out land and housing real estate projects. We tap Black and brown leaders who want to support the search, the fundraising, the acquisition, and the long-term asset management of those land and housing acquisitions, and we give it to them because we know that Oaklanders know what Oaklanders need.
And then with Esther's Orbit Room, I'm just so excited to get the keys and to be able to vision with folks in the space. and seeing the legacy Oaklanders who have memories of Esther and of being in that space, being able to come and remake it into their own space, that we can, help make that vision a reality. That's really what we're doing here. So the minimum investment is $1,000 share, but we actually let people pay it off with a payment plan. So I think our minimum invested to date is like $100 per person. Anyone in California and now in 12 other states can buy a share in EB PREC or more shares at $1,000, and those shares go into our general fund, which we invest in various projects like Esther's Orbit Room, which is a mix of commercial and residential property. And those investments really make it possible for us to keep the properties affordable and community owned. So it allows folks to take their money out of Wall Street or out of the bank and invest it in community.
We are reviving the historic asset Esther's Orbit Room under the name the Esther's Orbit Room Cultural Revival Project. We're bringing to market, because of the impact dollars that you yourself have invested in this vision, we're bringing to market 4 commercial footprints at 50% of market rate, a cafe, a bar, a performance venue, a fine arts gallery, a movement arts gallery, and we're trying to figure out how to create a resource for the kids too. Because we're using Esther's as the jump-off point to reground a community into the West Oakland corridor. And Esther's is the first step in the acquisitions in the flats of West Oakland. And it is the pilot project of our $50 million land and housing acquisition fund. Invest today.
All right. Well, now that you've learned a bit more about our vision and work, let's pause for some questions. If you have any burning questions, otherwise we will keep moving. Are there any questions that have come up so far?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So it's the revitalization of Esther's Orbit Room it's not just the shares alone that are helping to refinance it, right? Or to redevelop it. Can you say a little bit more about like how that funding model works?
Yeah, and we'll talk a bit more about it later in the presentation, but basically we operate with an integrated capital stack. So we bring in low cost debt, mostly from philanthropy, foundations making a program related investment or a low interest loan. And we also bring in this investor owner equity. We raised about $6 million to date with our investment owner equity. So it's about 30% of our capital stack. And then donations and grants, so purely philanthropic dollars as well. So because we're a California cooperative corporation, we're able to apply for commercial loans and as well bring in more philanthropic dollars. So yeah, we combine a number of different sources to be able to do the work that we do. The Esther's Orbit Room Revitalization Project is a $9 million project. So you can imagine there's a lot of different pieces there that we need to bring in to make that possible.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions coming up, folks? All right, well, I'm going to keep moving then. All right, so now I'm going to get into our model a little bit more, and I consider myself a co-op nerd, so this is fun for me to explain. If you already know about co-ops, this will just be a refresher for you. And so, like I said, we're a California cooperative corporation, and as a cooperative, which is pretty radical in this day and age. So you may be asking yourselves, what's a cooperative? And what is a multi-stakeholder cooperative like EB PREC? So do you want to, if anyone wants to just type in the chat or say out loud, what is a cooperative to you, or how would you define it?
Is it something that's co-owned, co-managed?
Totally.
Yeah, an org that's owned and controlled by the people who utilize its services.
Both are correct. And there's lots of different types of cooperatives. So we're going to get into what all the different types of cooperatives mean and what our type of cooperative is in particular. But the word cooperative can mean different things. As you can see, this visual is an elephant, and everyone is holding different parts of the elephant with their eyes closed. If you asked each person to describe how the elephant felt and what cooperative is, they would have different answers. So a cooperative is an entity or organization that is created and collectively controlled, owned, or patronized by its members or workers. And there's different types of cooperatives that we're going to get into. So next slide. So there's different cooperatives, like I said, and I'm just going to run through each one. So there's a consumer co-op. So that's a cooperative where the consumers of a product are the members and owners of the company itself. Members receive benefits through annual dividends, meaning their collective ownership allows them to buy their goods at lower prices. So for example, say your community needs childcare or medical clinic. As neighbors, you might come together to organize to open up your own childcare space or clinic that serves your specific needs as the consumers of that business. REI is another really common example of a consumer cooperative. Producer cooperatives sell their products collectively, like Tonka, which is a family of nationally branded native buffalo food-based products. And so by pooling their resources together to sell their products, they're able to bring down the operational costs and increase revenue. For example, they can decide to process their goods in 3 separate factories or pay for one piece of machinery rather than each of them separately buying that machinery, thus keeping their costs down. Land O'Lakes is an example of a really big dairy producer cooperative. But it really acts like a corporation because it's managed hierarchically. But its producers are all owners of the larger corporate entity. And then there's worker cooperatives. So worker cooperatives like Ours Mini Bakery and the Sustainable Economies Law Center, which was our incubating organization, are owned by the workers themselves. And yes, Mandela Food Co-op is another one. Thank you. So together, workers manage, operate, and self-govern their cooperative, making decisions together regarding their own wages, paid holidays, benefits, and big decisions that the business makes. So for example, you could organize this type of cooperative structure at a saloon or bar or any other workplace where the business benefits the workers and not the other way around. And then investment cooperatives are another type of cooperative. And so Boston Ujima Project is one of my favorite examples. There's also the Black Cooperative Investment Fund in LA. And those investment cooperatives choose projects or businesses to support with pooled capital investments from their members. Those investor owners or the members of the cooperative democratically determine how to deploy their capital. So it's aligned with the interests of the majority of their membership. Lastly, there are multi-stakeholder cooperatives or hybrid co-ops like EB PREC, which has multiple types of memberships. And so this model is somewhat unique to our organization. So we're going to take a deeper dive into what that means. So as a multi-stakeholder co-op, EB PREC makes decisions collectively with a variety of owners, pulling examples from other cooperative structures to help us execute our work. And so we have members called resident owners or community owners. You can see that in the top row there. And they are most similar to the consumer co-op, which is that those who like consume housing or receive housing, live in the housing, and contribute to EB PREC programming, help make decisions or guide the stewardship of our cooperative properties. So those are the folks that actually directly benefit from the product that we create, or the value that we create. We also have investor owners, just like in an investment co-op, who, unlike community owners, have purchased a share in the cooperative and are able to receive dividends on a regular basis. And then finally, we have staff owners like myself and our team, who perform the daily activities to keep EB PREC afloat and manage it every day, and move the cooperative's work forward. And so we combine all of these elements to be a multi-stakeholder cooperative. Members from all 4 categories guide the mission and vision of EB PREC by making decisions in the cooperative at events like our community owner circles and our annual member meeting, or at the properties that they live at if they're resident owners. As a multi-stakeholder co-op, our membership structure allows for our BIPOC community members to participate in real estate co-ownership as one or more of any of these owner types. All right, so I'm going to get into each owner type right now. So the first one, resident ownership, is the juicy part of our membership and the main goal of our cooperative, which is to permanently house East Bay residents and empower them to continue doing the work of planting the seeds of trees that we ourselves may not rest under. Resident owners are the folks that are actually living or working in EB PREC properties who have cooperatively organized along with other members of the cooperative to acquire and create permanently affordable housing through our model. When individuals sign a resident owner agreement, they become resident owners of the broader EB PREC cooperative. The resident owner agreement provides co-ownership in the cooperative with governance rights and responsibilities, as well as financial benefits of living in an EB PREC property or home. Resident owners also cooperatively manage and steward the property and have the opportunity to build limited equity. For us, ownership is based on residence and participation, not payment. And so there's no like high down payment requirement for being a resident owner. You can simply join as a resident and then start paying the monthly member contributions. Ownership is also accessible to individuals as young as 12 years old, giving collective decision-making and agency in a multi-generational community, with the purpose to empower the next generation with cooperative skills. And our staff also exists to provide property management support and support with training and cooperative governance and education to our resident owners. And that's a lot of the work that Chris does. So each property or piece of land that we collectively own or steward is a part of a web of relationships that we collectively nurture and are nurtured by. Unlike the dominant colonialist model of property ownership, EB PREC acquisitions are not commodities that can be exploited for profit or sold in the market, even by tenants. And so resident owners get to experience some of the most important and cooperative elements of ownership within the cooperative, including the power to decide things, both individually and collectively, the ability to build limited equity, protection against wealth extraction and conventional real estate transactions, stability made possible by our collective power and problem solving to prevent people from losing their home, even when there is financial hardship, and mobility or the power to leave or put down roots elsewhere when the time comes. But in our bylaws, we were actually prevented from selling any of our properties in our portfolio, which allows us to stabilize the cost of that housing and ensure that the property will never be used as a weapon to displace residents who are living there. All right, our next owner type are community owners. So community owners are the heart and soul of our cooperative. Any person rooted in the East Bay can become a community owner after attending an orientation, such as the one we're doing now, participating in events and governance, and contributing dues. If you're thinking about becoming a member, you've already completed the first step by being here today. Community owners collectively drive the mission and vision of EB PREC forward. And by voting on major decisions like future acquisitions, bylaw changes, the election of EB PREC's board members, and more. And staff supports community owners to help the co-op scale and spread our model throughout the region. This includes integrating the practices of our mission pillars that we talked about earlier in the presentation into all the work we do. For example, land without landlords. This mission pillar supports community owners by providing pro forma build-outs to understand the feasibility of acquiring their own property to steward. Under Heal People Power, we work internally to support conflict resolution practices between different owner groups of community owners. And more recently, under Restorative Economics, we've been working with our community owners and resident owners to build a rent repayment plan to support our tenants. So investor owners, this is our next owner group. So as you heard in the video earlier, folks can invest in EB PREC thanks to our Regulation D and California Cooperative shares. Investor owners are members who purchase an $1,000 or more, or can purchase more than one share in the cooperative and receive a target annual dividend of 1.5%. Investor owners have the least amount of power in our cooperative, which is by design, but they do have the ability to vote for 1/4 of our board of directors, so 2 out of the 8 seats. And we'll review the full governance structure in a moment. But we set it up this way to ensure that people, not profit, drive the decision making of our cooperative and protect our vision of transforming this unjust finance and housing system into one where power is shared equally and not just given to those with the most capital. Most folks in our communities do not have knowledge of investing or enough income to invest, which is why the EB PREC model is so beneficial to our community. We also encourage those of you who can to do so, to be able to invest in our model. And as well, take your money out of Wall Street, divest from Wall Street, and invest in your community by becoming an investor owner. There's more info in the chat about how to join as an investor owner. All right, staff owners. So that's us, the staff members who make decisions about make decisions and drive the work on a day-to-day basis of the cooperative. We also exist to serve and be responsive to all of the owners in our cooperative by facilitating owner participation in land and projects and through acquisition, capitalization, technical assistance, incubation, and co-ownership, as well as governance. Staff are considered trustees and take on responsibilities usually held by the board, but we do lead on our board of directors as well to support with guidance and work direction. Our staff owners also influence the day-to-day operations of EB PREC, like schedules, working conditions, and benefits. And all of our employees have the opportunity to become a staff owner after 18 months of employment with the cooperative. And then our board of directors. So to ensure that we continue sustaining our radical vision, we make sure our board members are local BIPOC residents who have backgrounds in organizing work, housing support, mutual aid, and other forms of cooperation. The board primarily oversees the staff to ensure we are fulfilling our purpose and are accountable to our cooperative owners. The board's roles include regularly reviewing financials, monitoring compliance, reviewing policies, and intervening on troublesome activity if it arises. And so what does our governance roadmap look like? We hold a roadmap of accountability between each party within the co-op, creating a tightly woven support system of cooperation. And so EB PREC exists to serve its owners, all of the owners that we've gone over today. So owners have core control over EB PREC through their election of the majority of the board and by voting on major decisions. Apart from those core powers, owners express their power and influence through countless small interactions with EB PREC, shaping EB PREC and our East Bay communities through participation in land projects, committees, working groups, and other initiatives. Similar to nature, owners are diverse members of our local community, and they have all kinds of habitats in order to thrive. So staff exists and serve to be responsive to all of our owners, facilitating owner participation in land projects and other initiatives. Through our daily work, staff make decisions about the day-to-day work and overall management of EB PREC. Like beavers, staff work diligently to create the ecosystems and conditions in which many communities can flourish. And the board is primarily oversees the work of the staff to ensure the staff are fulfilling our purpose and are accountable to owners. Like owls, board members watch and listen carefully. Voting, staff, community owners, and the board are all governing bodies involved in decision-making as inspired by our points of unity. We prioritize decentralized governance because it builds people power, creates resiliency, and fosters a strong sense of community ownership, activating people to protect and steward land in the long term. So what makes EB PREC's ownership model so unique? Let's compare real estate and land ownership models. So under a capitalist model, we see that private ownership is the sole or individual that has access to capital. That private owner becomes the landlord who then reaps the benefits of mixed income levels and market rate rents. Under the community land trust, or CLT, in the middle column, those are 501c3 organizations, so they're nonprofit organizations. And land or properties are taken off of the speculative market and put into a trust. Housing on that land is then offered to the community for sale through long-term ground leases, making the housing affordable by cutting out the cost of land. And CLTs are generally governed by a tripart board, meaning a group of folks that make decisions on behalf of the organization. CLTs have pretty similar property governance structures and access to similar funding as the permanent real estate cooperative. Because of their nonprofit status, CLTs are not able to offer limited equity or investment opportunities to their members. And then finally, the permanent real estate cooperative, which is our model. We are not for profit rather than a nonprofit, which is an important distinction. We are a California cooperative corporation, but we're not in the business of maximizing profit. We return all of the profit or surplus that we make back to our membership body. As a membership cooperative, we have multiple types of members who share the decision-making power rather than just a board. Our residents collectively manage and steward their own properties with the support of the cooperative. And we are also able to sell shares to our investor owners, which allows them to be investors and invest in community projects in our own communities. Lastly, members of the community who live in our properties are able to build wealth as resident owners within the cooperative. All right, now we're nearing the end of a presentation. Let's pause for a few more questions.
Feel like it's a lot to take in.
Yes. You can also feel free to reach out over email if you have additional questions.
Appreciate that. Can I ask a quick question actually?
Yeah.
With the I know it's a tri-part ownership model. With the investor, like I know it's limited return on investment, right? But what's to stop somebody from, like, how do you control for like somebody from somewhere else investing a ton and owning, a lot of EB, of Esther's Orbit Room or something like that? Like, how do you control for that for, somebody wanting to from outside of the neighborhood? So, right, like, how do you contain it within the community?
Yeah, totally. Well, we are able to accept people purchasing more than one share. But the way that we contain that in terms of their control or power is that we are, as a cooperative, we limit each member to one vote. So we adhere strictly to one member, one vote, which means that we do have, a large institutional investor who purchased 500 shares, right? That's $500,000 of our total $15 million fund. But they only have one vote, just like someone who purchased a $1,000 share. So even if they have a larger share of the financial cost of our projects, they will get the same amount of power and agency to make decisions and vote and have control as any other one of our members. And so that's how we contain the potentially outsized financial influence of outside people.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions before we move into our final slides? I know we covered a lot of ground, so like I said, feel free to reach out and email us with any specific questions if you have them after. All right, well, I'm going to keep moving then in the interest of time. So we've got a little matrix graphic here, but the question is cooperation right for you? The world is changing rapidly, and with new changes come new opportunities. These opportunities can hold many challenges and benefits. So imagine the impact you could make in the world by welcoming our model and a new way of thinking into your community. Our cooperative continues to seek out individuals, folks like you, knowledgeable and passionate enough to fight for this kind of change that they want to see in the world, to reject the oppressive conditions of wealth extraction and embrace the emergence of community ownership. We believe housing is a human right. So think about it. Is cooperation right for you? And again, we want to go back to our points of unity, which draw from our mission pillars that we talked about at the beginning. But considering the diversity in our owner community, we all agree to come together under these points of unity. These represent our core values and decisions made by EB PREC and are what we turn to if we need guidance with how to do what we're working on. If you find that any of these points of unity resonate with you, you might be a great contributor to community ownership under a cooperative model. My favorite point of unity is our last one, which is that we prioritize people at greater risk of displacement over people of greater means. And that really gets to the heart of our model, is that we actually put capital in the backseat in terms of agency and control over the cooperative. We make sure that those at the forefront are those most impacted by our housing crisis and racialized gentrification that we've seen. So if you find yourself moved by what you've seen today or learned today, and you live in or are rooted in the East Bay, we invite you to join us to becoming a member. To sign up, you must attend an EB PREC orientation, which check that off your list. We've done that today. And then read and sign our community owner agreement, which we've linked in the chat. The community owner agreement references our bylaws and articles of incorporation. And then you sign it and make a very modest member due, and then you join us as a member of our community ownership community. Once you join as a community owner, you have the ability to jointly steward a building, work with us to buy property and form a household together, or buy into a shared building, organize to protect a building or land, spearhead a policy advocacy campaign, and also just participate in what we're already doing as an organization, the projects that we already have going on. So thank you so much. We've only got a couple minutes left. Chris has put his email in the chat. If you have any more specific questions, you can reach out to Chris. And also please fill out our attendance form, which Christina has just placed in the chat, so that we can know that you are here and follow up with you with anything extra. So thank you so much again for your time, everyone.